Welcome back. The last 18 months, his profile rose because of his daily tweets on the coronavirus pandemic. He has had to face the good, the bad, and the ugly conversations about the pandemic, but soldiered on as he sought to have the country find ways of combating the virus. Over that period, he retired from the pathology laboratory he founded and take on new challenges. Tonight on The Living Legends, we speak with a man who has been feted as one of the top 100 pathologists in the world for 3 years in a row, Dr. Ahmed Kalebi. Dr. Ahmed Kalebi, it's an extreme pleasure to have you here as our guest this evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you too. Actually, I'm the one who's very much honored to be interviewed by a legend. It's quite a pleasure and a privilege to be interviewed by you.
Thank you very much for the compliment, but you are the true living legend. And to go right into the interview, we go back, a long, long way back. Humble beginnings for Dr. Ahmed Kalebi. Tell us about your early life, how it all started.
I mean, most people know me for growing up in Kibra. I mean, I think people associate Kibra, being a slum, one of the largest slums in Africa, a lot of poor people there. So when people hear that I'm a doctor from Kibra, they get shocked. How did you even make it growing up in Kibra and becoming a doctor? And that's been a subject of many, many conversations. But for me, I don't take it for granted. I was quite lucky and fortunate. I was raised by a single mom. My mom was a single parent for the longest time. I was raised by a whole village, by my uncles, my aunt, my maternal grandmother and grandfather, growing up in Kibra. And I think that kind of helped me because you get all this stimulation and cues from different people. But I was the first person to actually go to university from my whole family, probably from my whole village, so to speak, in Kibra, in Kambimru. I went to primary school in Kibra, went to secondary school in Jamhuri, the so-called
Jamhuri High School.
Yes, the notorious Jamhuri.
I'm a Jamhuri High School boy as well.
Then you have something in common.
Yes, we definitely have something in common.
I was actually the first student under KCSE to get an A in Jamhuri High School, get a straight A. And I remember our headmaster then, Mr. Salim, one time saying, how come nobody has ever gotten an A in this school? It's high time somebody got an A. And I told myself, I'll get that A, and I actually got it. And that was my ticket to get into medical school, because those days you could only have 100 people being admitted to medical school in University of Nairobi. And by then I think we had 2 medical schools with Eldoret, so only 200 people or so could get admitted in medical school, not like now. So it was quite competitive. And when I look back at how, when I became a lecturer and I look back at how competitive it is, I think it was just probably pure luck, because I had, of course, a lot of tough time even paying school fees. Most of the time I would go through scholarships, primary school, secondary school, university. It was basically scholarships through and through. Yeah. So I always tell people I'm a creature of scholarships, and I think that fighting spirit in Kibra then made me who I am, I think.
That's the saying goes, God only helps those who help themselves.
True, true.
Okay, let's just move on. Founding a pathology laboratory, how it grew to becoming a multinational SME, and just to expand a little further, the role of medical pathology in everyday management of health matters.
I started small, but with a big dream. And I think within 5 years, we became the biggest lab. We expanded to East Africa. I think by 2016, I was employing more than 600 people across East Africa. We had more than 50, 60 branches. Actually, by the time I was retiring in April this year, we had 88 branches across East Africa, serving more than 1,000 patients a day. I think actually at least 95%, if not 100% of all doctors in Kenya have actually had a lab result from me. And that's quite an honor and a privilege.
That's an extreme honor and commendable. Shows how reliable your tests are. Now, very important, an amazing accreditation which you got. Lancet was one of the laboratories approved by the World Anti-Doping Agency to do blood analysis for the athlete biological passport.
Yes.
Now, what was the process involved, and what challenges and opportunities did this present for you in the fight against doping in sport?
We were the first lab north of Limpopo and south of Sahara, as I say, to actually get this WADA accreditation. Because before there was one lab in Bloemfontein in South Africa and another one in Tunisia. And what will happen is these tests will have to be sent to either Doha or to Germany or Switzerland. But because of the time, And you know, the way what is supposed to be done, the tests are supposed to, it's supposed to be impromptu. You should be able to go to Eldoret and say, Fayyaz, you are an athlete, we want to test you now, so that you don't actually go cheating, because there's a lot of cheating.
You don't have time to play around.
Time to play around. But because those guys knew that these tests have to be planned, because you have to plan the flights and everything, by the time a Mzungu comes, they know these people are coming to collect our samples, so they could actually take some precautions. So apparently these discussions were going on. And this is why it's good to be good to people. There is a lady called Njeri Onyango. She's a lawyer. We were the first people to move into the building that Lancet is in, Fifth Avenue. And we became very good friends. So she happened to be sitting, she's an ex-volleyballer. She was actually, I think, the captain of the Kenya volleyball team. Okay. She happened to be sitting in one of the committees, and the people were discussing about the challenges of testing. Then she says, I know one young man who can solve this problem. And they're like, who? They're like, no, there's a big lab in Kenya which can actually be able to do for you. So she introduced my name to somebody from Europe, and they came to inspect our lab, thinking that, you know, it will just be one of those small labs,
just
because these African labs cannot. They are blown away by the kind of lab that we had here, and
the state-of-the-art facility.
The state-of-the-art facility, exactly. And they told us, we want to train you to actually do anti-doping tests, and we thought it's a lot of money. Actually, it's not a lot of money in terms of actually the volume compared to what we are doing already. But you know, it was such an opportunity, because I remember I got calls from the Ministry of Sports and so on. They said, if you can do this, you'll really help the country a lot. And I think we're having a lot of controversies then. So they sent people to train my staff. My staff went to Europe, to Switzerland, actually to Switzerland, and they got trained. And that's how we're getting accredited. And since then, we've managed to actually impact a lot in terms of testing for athletes. And you know, because the main thing about testing for anti-doping is a deterrence.
Going back to you being vocal and informing people of how serious an issue COVID-19 is, because there's lots of conspiracy theories. It doesn't exist. Should we take the vaccine or not? Just give us a quick insight.
When you look at this COVID story, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy. But, I mean, the virus doesn't recognize conspiracy. It doesn't know who is. I mean, a lot of people who are denialists, as I call them, have died. A lot of people who have been, I'll say, anti-vaxxers have died. I mean, this virus is a pandemic. It spreads, unlike any other virus, it spreads, you know, respiratory, but it's highly infectious. It is not highly lethal. Let's be very clear. In fact, if COVID was like Ebola, it wouldn't be a big problem, because Ebola is very dangerous. But Ebola, I call it a stupid virus, because it will kill its victims very quickly. So it doesn't have time to spread. But COVID, it doesn't kill many people in terms of percentage. And it will take time. It doesn't show symptoms as much, which is why it is very lethal, because it will spread to many people and kill more people than any other. So in terms of the actual quantum, more people have died of COVID within a very short time than any other virus or any other disease. So
has the vaccine helped?
Vaccine gives better immunity. So the answer, the point is, some people will say, oh, you know, we've had COVID, but we don't need to get vaccination.
There's this thought process where people who've had COVID have better protection and immunity than people who've been vaccinated.
But real life data, including data that was published by CDC yesterday, says it differently. The point is, everybody should get vaccinated. Vaccine has no harm. In fact, to answer the conspiracy theorists, I'll say this. This is the first vaccine that was ever used in Europe and in the West before it was used
before it came to Africa.
And like polio. So why will those guys harm themselves at our expense? Right. So for us, we've had this benefit of seeing, you know, as they say, ukiona mwenzako ananyolewa aza kutia maji. So we have been looking at what happens in Europe. The same thing, vaccines have worked there. Let us use the vaccine. And the vaccines are fortunately available now.
Giving back to the community through the education under Haiba Foundation and sport through Gogo Boys Football Club.
Yes.
How are these social endeavors of yours?
Can you ask me about the retirement, then I go to that? Yes.
Okay. All right. Why did you retire? A quick response.
Yes. I mean, I had planned to retire. From 2016, I had planned to actually take a break. Out 2021, step down as CEO and managing director. But then when my daughter got married in 2018, I realized that I didn't have time for my family. They are literally been growing without me. And I say, it was actually an epiphany moment, and I said, come 2020, I will take a complete break. I want to take a 2 to 3 year break with family, take care of myself, because I was working extremely hard. And basically what I'm doing right now is just concentrating on family, trying to do a few social community projects, and planning for my next venture, incubating some new ideas over the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah, so
that's really nice to hear, because I have the same vision as you. I think family is so important.
Yes.
And with God's grace, you know, my kids are all grown up, all married. I have 4 grandchildren.
Yes.
That is my true wealth.
And I'm
and
sure
I'm glad you have the same
it,
vision
yeah.
as me. That is the biggest and the greatest blessing. And if you've actually taken a break
Just
and
for
to
them.
just, you know, create stronger bonds with your family, nothing better than that.
They are teenagers, young adults. I think they need me more than ever now.
100%.
And I think
100%.
no wealth and nothing else can actually make up for.
That's the best job you've taken after retirement.
Thank you.
And you're going to love every second and minute of it.
Thank you. And I'm a grandfather, so my grandson is keeping me quite busy, and I'm trying to literally pay back to my daughter.
It's the best thing ever. Being a grandfather is the best thing ever.
Yes.
And you know, we spoil them more. And my kids keep telling me, oh, you were so strict with us, but with your grandchildren, you're pretty cool, huh?
It just changes your perspective in the world, and I'm quite fortunate to have, blessed to have my grandson. Yeah.
May the Almighty always bless you and your children.
Thank you.
And your grandchildren.
Thank you.
Right, let's go back quickly to education under Haiba Foundation and sport through Gogo Boys Football Club. Tell us in a quick nutshell.
So, I mean, I started Gogo Boys Football Club in 2014. This is actually a football club of my childhood friends, most of them who became gangsters. In fact, some of them are even marked as the terrorists, and they were in the limelight between 2000 and 2010. And in 2012, they made a decision to reform. And in 2014, they formed a football club, which I helped to fund. And now we are actually in Division 2 after 6 years, going through the ladder, you know, from sub-county, county, and we hope to go to Division 1 actually next week. Oh. Tomorrow we are playing our final match.
That's fantastic
and I think
progress.
We might actually go to
Congratulations.
Division 1. But for me, our motto is said, playing for change. And I mean, I'm just amazed at the impact the Gogo Boys Football Club has had in our Kibra community, inspiring the formation of other clubs, inspiring other clubs to go up their level, even inspiring other clubs beyond Kibra, because other clubs in Dandora, Ruiru, and other places try to emulate. I think we're the first football club at grassroots level to actually have replica jerseys, and we sell them. We actually sell out replica jerseys. I think when we have our derby in Kibra, it's actually one of the biggest derbies after Mashemeji derby. We call it the neighbors derby, Majirani derby, or bedroom derby. So it's actually been quite stimulating.
Oh, that's a lovely story.
And
actually.
Lancet was actually
Very
one
inspiring.
of the corporate. Lancet was one of the corporate sponsors, and now we have 4 corporate sponsors on board. And I see the impact it has had on the guys who are playing, but also the entire community. And that's one of the things I'm actually trying to do now, and do it well during this time of my retirement break. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And
we
have a
Haiba Foundation?
So I have a foundation that we started with the late Prof. Hassan Saidi, because when I went to university, in 1995, those days you'll hardly find 2 to 3 people going to college and university, tertiary education from Kibra. And I remember Professor Hassan Saidi, when I became a doctor in 2001, he says, why don't we try and do something? Because we had already been sort of like sponsoring students from Kibra, giving them mentorship. We said, let's form this organization that will allow us to encourage more youths to go to school. The problem in Kibra is not lack of people being bright. I mean, some of the brightest guys who became gangsters and were killed were actually my schoolmates and classmates, but there was no value given to education. And it's actually, even till today, there is an element of, why should I go to school? Because I can become a politician and become very rich. I can be a thief and do better. Yeah. And it was even worse.
Shortcuts.
The shortcuts. And it was even worse when I was growing up.
Shortcuts never pay.
Absolutely. When
it's all about hard work.
In fact, growing up, people tell me, what is this you're studying so hard? All this maths, all this science. You actually think you'll become a doctor, and they laugh at me. And I think we changed the narrative.
But you're a clear example. Yeah, you're the role model.
Exactly. We changed
the narrative. Of where it started, where you ended.
Exactly.
It was pure hard work.
So we use...
It didn't just happen.
Absolutely. And actually what we are doing now is we use ourselves as, as mentors, and we inspire others. And I'm very proud to say right now we have up to 30, 40 students every year from Kibra, from our Nubian community and Kibra at large, going to university every year. And of course, the biggest tragedy is a lot of them end up finishing university and there are no jobs, and those are some of the things I try to do through entrepreneurship to create job opportunities, and inshallah I'll be able to get opportunities to even do better in the future.
Inshallah. You know, we could talk forever,
Yeah.
but we've run out of time.
Thank you.
Dr. Kalebi, Dr. Ahmed Kalebi, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest on our Living Legends segment.
It's
Thank you very much.
honor,
Let's
it's
have
an
the-
honor actually
Let's
to be
check.
interviewed by a legend like you, and I feel like a living legend now
Thank
after
you
this legend.
Thank you so much. You are the
Legend
living
interview.
legend.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Dr. Ahmed Kalebi, a pathologist, entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. He has been honored globally for his work in medical pathology. The laboratory he founded has been approved to carry out work in the fight against doping in sport and in the fight against the coronavirus. He is now retired and is looking at mentoring the next generation of medical pathologists and making sure that Kibra's talents are nurtured to full potential.